So before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Wadawurrung and Eastern Maar. I pay my respects to past, present and emerging. I will be helping to facilitate this meeting, and I'd ask you all to put your microphones on mute if you haven't already done so, just so we can minimise background noise whilst Sarah and Tony are presenting. I'll also be monitoring the chat box. So if at any stage you do have questions, I ask you to pop them in there, and there's allocated time for questions at the end. Great. So if at any stage you do have technical difficulties, which unfortunately can happen whilst we're all working remotely, don't worry if you do drop out. As I said, this is being recorded, and we are also hosting a second information session on Wednesday the 9th that you can register via our Eventbrite. Information also can be found on our Community Environment Grants Program website page and the e-news that gets distributed regularly as well. On the website, there is a sign up section that you can sign up for if you're not already on that distribution list. So obviously today's information session is on the Community Environment Grants Program, which is being delivered as part of the Wild Otways initiative. The Australian Government's Wild Otways initiative is a $6 million investment from the Australian Government's Restoration Fund to improve conservation outcomes in the Otways region. Of that $6 million, the Community Environment Grants Program is a $1 million investment to support and deliver projects to protect and restore native plants, wildlife, coastal environments in the area between Bells Beach, Peterborough and the Otways hinterland. I'll hand over to our General Manager, Sarah Holmcliffe, to discuss that more.
Thanks, Olivia, and welcome everyone. Ishta, if you can just skip down to slide 3, that'd be awesome. So if anyone has any questions, we'll sort of go through a bit of a presentation between myself and Tony, and if you've got questions, just feel free to add them into the chat box, and we'll have plenty of time to have a conversation at the end. So I just thought I'd take the opportunity just to give you an overarching perspective on the whole Australian Government's Wild Otways initiative. So Olivia's already mentioned that it's $6 million and that the grants program is $1 million of that. There's also 5 other sub-projects which have been commissioned sub-projects, and so they actually went out to public tender in July, and we're just in the processes of having inception meetings for each of those programs at the moment. So you can see there, so the first one is around pig and deer eradication, although probably more aptly called pig and deer management. The second one is around fox and feral cat control in planned burn landscapes. The third one is focused around preventing the introduction of Phytophthora into critical habitat areas and reducing the impact of infestation at key sites. The fourth one is primarily a research-based project on small mammal conservation. So identifying factors that underpin some critical refuge habitats for small mammals, and that'll focus on Carlisle Heath and the Eastern Otways. And then the final one is around rewilding, and we've actually only contracted stage 1 for that at this stage, which is a feasibility analysis to look at which species and where you'd even consider rewilding, to then make a decision on what stage 2 and then potentially stage 3 on the ground where rewilding program might look like for the Otways. We've got stage 1 is being led by Natural Decisions for that rewilding program. We've got Conservation Ecology Centre, and I know that Jack and co are here today leading the pig and deer and the fox and cat project. And Barbara Wilson and her team are leading under a partnership with various universities, the Phytophthora management and the small mammal conservation programs. And obviously all of those programs working quite closely in integration with the public land managers, being Parks Victoria and Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. Next slide, thanks Ishta. So the primary outcome for the Wild Otways initiative from an Australian government perspective is the trajectory of species targeted under the Threatened Species Strategy and other EPBC Act priority species are stabilised or improved. The main investment priorities in terms of species are first and foremost the spot-tailed quoll, and then the long-nosed potteroo, swamp antechinus, southern brown bandicoot, broad-toothed rat and New Holland mouse. There's also a number of cross-program activities happening as part of this initiative, which we're yet to develop and procure. One is around an integrated monitoring program, which will be an overarching initiative monitoring program. And then the second one being a web portal, which will become kind of the legacy in terms of communications and telling the story of the Wild Otways initiative and its outcomes. And a key point there is that the overall initiative has a fairly hard end date of June 2023. So things will be moving fairly rapidly to deliver. And now I'll hand over to Tony to get into the guts of the grants program. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon, everybody. And yeah, thanks for that overview. So yeah, my name's Anthony Byrne. I'm a project officer. I've just been recently employed under this Wild Otways initiative and in part the Dunes Restoration Program as well, which is sort of running in tandem. So I guess you can see from Sarah's overview, this is a pretty ambitious project with a lot of integrated parts working together, and the community grants is a pretty important part of this as well to complement that broader suite of initiatives and research type projects that are in the private land estate, and working with local communities to improve the trajectory of the threatened species and threatened vegetation communities in the Otways over the next couple of years. So Australian government program is for community groups, local government and traditional owners doing on-ground projects so that protect and restore native veg, fauna and coastal environments. And the purpose of today is really just to outline the grants, the process for application, but also to develop through some of the feedback and questions at the end a set of standard FAQs, which will be put up on the website as Livia explained. And if you could just save your questions for the end, we should have plenty of time to have a chat about those things as well. So Ishtar, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, mate. So you can see we've got a fairly large investment area, so you can pretty much draw a line between Bells Beach and Cobden right through the Otway hinterland and down to the coast. This obviously takes in a large portion of that public land estate under parks and DELP management, but also incorporates, as you can see, a pretty significant private land estate as well. So those high value assets and threatened species habitat that persist on private land, so those key assets that are protecting those, improving and maintaining them, and potentially reconnecting those with the high value core assets in the public land estate where applicable as well. So next slide, Ishtar. So the scope of works that'll be funded, I guess I've sort of worked with a number of community organisations in the past. You're probably very familiar with the scope of works and activities. I guess if you've been sort of involved in land care grants and the like in the past as well. So typical activities like fencing to remove stock and protect remnant native veg, including threatened vegetation communities, flora species, and habitat for fauna, and particularly threatened fauna where it's suitable. So high threat woody weed, herbaceous weed control to improve remnant vegetation, improve this habitat, and ideally improve native veg diversity and cover. Pest animal control is included, but with some fairly significant exclusions, which I'll sort of touch on later, but some of the things that are, I guess, typically excluded under land care style grants of the past. So revegetation with local indigenous species, especially those that connect or link any of those remnant vegetation assets. So there's no minimum size threshold for sites, but connectivity to sort of high quality native vegetation sites would be a benefit, or where you sort of have connections to threatened species records, or it sort of augments that habitat or improves that habitat. But I guess importantly, there's a minimum requirement for the width of habitat corridors if those are the sorts of things being reinstated. So a minimum of 10 metres wide. And I guess projects that importantly also improve sites containing Aboriginal cultural heritage values, where that's sort of suitable, applicable and with the correct permissions. And things like track construction to prevent weed or disease spread or human impacts on environmentally sensitive areas. Track consolidation work, or in some cases where that may enable more effective management of certain sites into the future. So next slide, thanks Ishtar. So as we've pointed out, it's a $1 million program. Grants for individual groups are sort of between $5,000 and $50,000 per annum. So over a 2-year project, that's sort of up to $100,000 in total over a 2-year period. So $50,000 per annum is the maximum amount. So I guess a couple of important points, I suppose, which will be hopefully useful for us to sort of help, I guess, discuss these projects in the next little bit. So the application is open now. You can make those applications through our CMA website. The applications close on the 22nd of January. So it's sort of, I imagine there'd be a sort of a reasonable momentum to get these things well understood and sort of sketched out before the end of the year. So, so yeah, my contact details are there. I'll put these up at the end again, but yeah, I guess we have a sort of short timeline pre-Christmas, so keen as ever with these questions that sort of get developed from here, or any more specific inquiries through our grants website, or contacting me directly. So Ishtar, just the next slide, mate. So a couple of key points. If you could go down to the next slide, sorry, Ishtar. So yeah, grants are open to all community-based and traditional owner groups in the program area that we've shown before, and who can, I guess, demonstrate how they'll deliver those on-ground environmental improvement works that protect and restore native veg habitat on the coasts. So applicants must be incorporated organisations, hold sufficient insurance, so public liability and the like, typical for incorporated organisations. I guess what's a bit different this year is having a COVID safe plan for these projects. So a lot of this stuff is provided in the appendices for the funding guidelines on our website as well. And there's also information there about auspicing arrangements for people who aren't, I guess, operating under a Landcare banner or the like. So yeah, I guess we're ideally looking to run one round of funding depending on interest. So yeah, we'd encourage you to sort of, yeah, put your project idea to us in this round just to make sure that you don't miss out. So we spoke about the types of work considered. There are, I guess, some activities which won't be funded. So for pest animal control, I guess there's some excluded activities there, such as shooting, poisoning, trapping, explosives and fumigation treatment. And that includes sort of engaging contractors to undertake these activities. So the same typical exclusions for Landcare grants. And I guess it's those other, I guess, typical exclusions such as, you know, boundary fencing, revegetating with non-indigenous species and the like. So, and project management and admin fees would be sort of no more than 10% of the total project amount. But again, a lot of this is supplementary information in the appendices and in the funding guidelines online. So regarding the process, I suppose, the website has an online application form. Unfortunately, the website can't save a progressive application that you may have been, I guess, familiar with through Smarty grants and the like. So there's a downloadable and editable PDF. So that just to help you sort of compile your project details offline. And there's a sort of supporting checklist there for documentation. So need to sort of provide mapping, letters of support for the land that would be where the work would be occurring, and budget auspicing documents and the like to be uploaded. So when you're ready to submit it, it'd just be copying, pasting that content and submitting the application through the website like that. So next slide, thanks Ishta. So again, a number of additional resources which there are links to in the funding guidelines. So I guess like information for you to be able to follow up around, say, threatened species recovery plans and the like, and I guess strategic documents such as the regional catchment strategy, which would help to sort of develop the project concepts potentially. And I guess the information around cultural heritage considerations for your particular project, OH&S, child safe standards and the like, land manager consent and auspice arrangements. So there's also a list of minimum standard guidelines that are attached documents through the guidelines online, just to, I guess, outline the minimum standards for fencing, the requirements for not using barbed wire and the like to manage impacts to native wildlife. So next slide, thanks Ishta. So the assessment criteria, this sort of, again, part of the guidelines, but gives you that proportional weighting for aspects of the application, which will be considered by the grants evaluation panel. So how the project contributes to environmental outcomes, community participation and benefit, the planned project objectives so that they're kind of achievable in the timeframe set out, and finally the project costs in terms of value for money, and you know that they're realistic cost and justification for any of those budgeted items. So, and next slide, thanks Ishta. So from here, so the grant applications are going to be reviewed by the grant panel based on those criteria I just outlined before. After January the 22nd, we'd be notifying successful applicants of funding and developing funding agreements to be signed off within 4 weeks of notifications, and first payments would be made at that point as well. And successful applicants, there'd be a requirement to submit a 6-monthly report detailing, you know, I guess your expenditure, the achievements, data collected and the like, and any learnings from the project as it continues. So we'd be sending out a report template, I suppose. So we'll endeavour to make this as straightforward as we can so that you're sort of spending more time being able to do the on-ground side of it rather than the talking side of it. So anyway, that's the sort of process from here in terms of timelines. And the final slide there, Ishta. So Olivia had outlined before that we'd, you could be putting your questions into the chat box. We'll be sort of putting together FAQs off the back of this session. And I guess I would just encourage you to make contact with me through a website or through my contact details as part of this presentation. So to discuss any of the potential project proposals or any of the criteria and the funding guidelines which may not be clear. So I'm obviously keen to sort of meet more people and understand a little bit more about how and where you work and the types of projects you're interested in sort of investigating. So yeah, any questions at this stage, or did Sarah have anything else to add at this point?
We did have one question from Andrea around funding, and Sarah has answered that. Did you want to discuss more on that answer, Sarah, or Andrea?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So yes, the question was about the, it can be $5,000 to $50,000 per year. And Andrea was just asking as to whether that means you can apply for $100,000 across the 2 years. So that's correct. If you wanted to apply for a 2-year project, then you could apply for up to $50,000 per year for that project. And I guess probably just the important point there is in the assessment criteria, all of those assessment criteria kind of contribute to a value for money assessment essentially. And so risk and value for money are kind of taken into consideration across all 4 criteria. So obviously if if the project is you know, on the upper limit of that 50,000 per year across 2 years, then we'd be expecting sort of some fairly clear detail and justification of the value for money kind of proposition there. So that's probably just the key thing to keep in mind is, yeah, to make sure that the detail of the project proposal is commensurate with the amount and value that you're applying for.
We did have another question from Thomas asking, is ecological burning suitable for this funding program?
Yeah, I think it's a suitable, yeah, it's a suitable intervention. I guess it's just, yeah, I guess it's the difficulties around sort of planning and scheduling that sort of stuff, and and those other controls and permitting around, you know, making those things sort of doable in a short time frame potentially. So long as that stuff is sort of, I guess, well articulated and those other control measures are in place, then I don't see why they couldn't be considered. I guess, but yeah, it has to have a sort of clear link to an outcome for native vegetation and for the threatened species that you know, I guess with those project objectives in mind. So.
Perfect. I've got a question here from Kelly asking, can you explain more about ex-GST requirements? Do groups pay the GST?
Kelly, do you want to just explain that question a little bit more? And Ish, did you want to stop sharing so we can all see each other again? That's great.
Thanks, mate.
Kelly, you're welcome to explain that off mute. It's fine.
Have we got Kelly there? I just wondering what you mean by the exclusive GST question before I answer it.
She's just said in the,
oh, sorry.
She's just said in the chat box there was a comment on a slide about ex-GST.
There's been some grants recently that don't include GST, and she may mean that. Is there GST?
Okay, so no. Well, all that's suggesting is that $5,000 to $50,000 is exclusive of GST. Yep. So therefore, you can add GST onto that, and obviously, it's going to depend on whether, as a community group, you're registered for GST or not registered for GST. So we're just clarifying that the total amount of the grant can be between 50 to 50K, exclusive of GST. Does that make sense, Kelly?
Yep, she said thank you, so I think it does.
Okay, cool.
I think Matt's got his hand up.
Hi guys, thanks for the presentation. Appreciate it. Are there any thoughts on you know, weighting given to matters of national environmental significance over state? So for instance, looking at habitat recovery for threatened species, is there going to be more weight EBC listed species than VicGov, you know, Victoria listed species, or any thoughts on that in terms of how you present the outcome?
Yeah, look, I guess it's Australian government funding. I guess those priority species are those federally listed, those MNES, I suppose. So they're really the grants are open to any of those improvement works, and you know, I guess where those things are sort of suitable for restoration of, you know, I guess advisory listed species in the region, like those things would be, you know, I guess valued as well. As far as it sort of being a decision about them being excluded on focusing on those species, I guess it depends on where the work occurs. If those, you know, if those species sort of overlap in some respects, those sort of state and federally listed species, that, you know, you'd have outcomes for both ideally. So yeah, I don't think it would be, it doesn't necessarily exclude habitat improvement, you know, to kind of augment that against the entire sort of Otway estate, not just threatened species, but.
Yeah, and probably just to add to that, Matt, so obviously the whole of the Wild Otways initiative is focused on those threatened species and EPBC outcomes, but the other 5 sub-projects under that other stream obviously specifically focused around those threatened species and protection. Whereas the community grants program, and explicitly it was an election commitment funding this whole round, and the ministers was keen to make sure that the community grants part was broad and inclusive, and that it really opened up opportunities to all community groups to look at what they needed for their areas. So they wouldn't, so really just keep focused on those broad assessment criteria. It wouldn't be, you know, if your project was specifically to do with New Holland mouse, you'll suddenly push up there because there's other work in the initiative, I guess, that's kind of taking on that EPBC perspective.
All right, that's helpful. So it's certainly not a deal breaker.
Not at all.
No.
Yeah, no. Think broad and inclusive
Right.
is the key. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
I can't see any other questions in the chat box unless anyone wanted to.
Yeah, all good.
So if no one else has one, just another quick one. Similar to that sort of private versus public land, is there any thoughts on, you know, whether there'd be a preference for investment on public lands, or it's...
No, so no preference. It's really about, yeah, kind of the activity and the outcome, really. And the only requirement there is that whoever the land manager is, that you've got consent from that land manager. So if it's public land, then you'd need a letter of support from Parks Victoria or the Department of Environment. But obviously similar with the land, if it's a private land, then, you know, ultimately we'll need to have kind of evidence of the private land manager's consent to the program.
Murray?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Are you available for site inspection, more specific meetings at the moment, or are you still working from home?
Look, I guess we sort of hadn't put the site inspection as part of the grants evaluation or anything like that. But if you think there's value in discussing these sorts of things on site, then I guess, yeah, there's the opportunity to come out and discuss those things on the ground if you think that'd be valuable. Yeah, I'm certain we can make some time to do that sort of thing.
Yep, and just a couple other quick ones. Spring Creek, it's sort of right on the edge. The map's a little bit vague.
Yeah. Yep.
Would that be a yes or a eligible?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure if how sort of hard and fast these boundaries are. But yeah,
It's a pretty fuzzy boundary for a reason, and that was, yeah, kind of the minister's direction to make it a fuzzy boundary. So it definitely, yeah. So I guess she said it, you know, it has to go from at least Bells Beach to Peterborough, but yeah, Spring Creek wouldn't get chopped off as a definitive line if there's a valued project there.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Any other questions from anybody?
I've just had Andrea ask for you to send out your contact details, Anthony, and they are also available on the Community Environment Grants page on our website as well.
Yeah, so on that front page of the grants, you'll find my information in there as well. So yeah, we can circulate that at the end of the meeting for sure.
So yeah, so I would encourage people to get onto the grants page if you haven't already. Download the editable PDF application form. As we've sort of mentioned at the start, applications will need to happen online, but we've made that editable PDF there available for people to kind of work up separate to the online process, and then be able to just then move that information across into the online form on the day that you're ready to submit it. So use that editable PDF as a way to help kind of project plan with partners and others that you're working with.
Perfect. No more questions now?
Yep.
Please.
Mary's got another one, I think.
Please.
Oh yeah, just you mentioned the June Care earlier. I haven't been able to see a lot more information on that one. Am I looking in the wrong spot?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So do you want to go, Tony? Or?
Oh no, you take it. Go ahead.
So the June Care one's just starting to get developed. So it won't be a grants program open to community groups, so to speak. The direction from the Australian government is that it'll be funding to public land managers who manage the coastline to protect key dune sites. And so there'll be an on-ground works component that will be focused around those public land managers. And then there'll also be a dune care education program, which is currently actually out, and we'll have confirmation on who'll be delivering that smaller education component in the next month or so.
Yeah, that's all right. Just earlier in the year, it sort of had this one and that, like they were going to be similar. So that's
yeah. And that's been kind of through clarification with the Australian government to really focus on those public land managers.
That's all right.
But the range, but it will go from the geographic range has expanded during that time as well. So it's actually the Bellarine and Great Ocean Road dune care program now, and it goes all the way from the Bellarine through to Marengo in its scope.
Sorry, Thomas, did you have a question, mate?
Yeah, just a quick one. I might have just missed it, but there was that there was the focus on threatened species, but was there mention of threatened ecological communities?
Yep.
Not specific to actual species, but I suppose whole communities and EVCs as a whole.
Exactly. Yep. So they'd be again those sorts of projects protecting those threatened EVCs. Would certainly be, potentially, high value projects for us to sort of look at as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, so Thomas, what I was saying before about the threatened species component is the other stream with those other 5 sub-projects would be very much focused on those threatened species and EPBC listed species, whereas the community grants program, the direction from the Minister is that it should be broad and inclusive and doesn't need to be as specific.
All right, so Ish has just shared my my contact details as well. So, sorry, Matt, you have another question?
Oh, you're on mute, Matt.
Sorry, mate, you're on mute.
I knew someone would do it today. It's usually me.
Thank you all. It's the so look, just quickly, any thoughts on? I think I know what you're going to say. Implementation versus planning. So obviously you want to see on-ground outcomes and tangible outcomes, but are there any thoughts on potentially incorporating some planning activities or strategy that's, to be clear, in support of threatened species recovery and so forth, but inclusion of those kinds of activities? So for instance, a combination of on-ground works with, say, a catchment plan for 10 years, which sets up further investment in species recovery. Any thoughts on that sort of longer term planning to support more work going forward?
Yeah, look, not to suggest that isn't very valuable work to do as well. It's just, I guess the focus of this funding is on on-ground works. And I guess there's whether those things can be, I guess, part of what a complementary or in-kind sort of work that may occur through particular groups or whatever, that those other planning things are sort of running in parallel. Those things would be obviously of great value to the project longer term as well. So I guess, we're not, in terms of planning activities for, I guess, scoping works longer term, or getting a sort of strategy or planning kind of approach together. That's not really covered by these grants. That would be my response there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so definitely the Australian government's focus is on ground. I think that so the lion's share should be focused on ground, but similar, if you were looking at, an element of planning or even an element of, community engagement and capacity building, it would not be eligible to apply just for a project that focused on planning or research, or just a project that focused on capacity building. But building that in as a component of a program that's going to build legacy and carry forward, you know, obviously then demonstrates some of the value for money for what we're investing in. So definitely as a component, but not as the only focus or the core focus is. Yeah.
All right. No worries. Thank you.
Any more questions? All right, then we might wrap it up. But yeah, just to reiterate, our website under Community Environment Grants Program is where a lot of this information is hosted. There's also a frequently asked questions section as well. We'll be adding some of the questions that was asked today to that section as well. You can find Tony's details, which are also now in the chat box, but on that page, there's also the option to sign up to our Community Environment Grants Program e-newsletter. A lot of information will be distributed through there, as well as on our social media channels and updated on the website. I guess, yeah, the biggest thing is that grants are open now. The option to download that Edward PDF when filling in your form, because unfortunately we don't have the capacity for it to be saved, is really important. It'll help you put your application together. And yeah, I hope that you've found some value in this online session, and we'll be hosting another one on the 9th of December, and you can sign up for that again, or share that through your community networks for other people to attend. And the recording will also be available made on our website as well. So yeah, I'd like to thank you all for attending, and any further questions, just contact Tony, or the best point of contact first would be definitely the website.
Yep. Fantastic. Thanks for everybody coming along. It was nice to meet some of you. And yeah, please, I'd encourage you to sort of follow up with a call or through the grants website. I'm happy to answer any questions and clarify any things that are, I guess there's a fair bit of detail on the website, so maybe it'll just, point you in the right direction as well. So thanks for your time.